From the Lever's reader-supported newsroom, it's Lever Time. I'm David Sirota. Show up at any kid's sports games these days, and you'll see parents in the bleachers who seem to think they're shooting ESPN documentaries, hoping they'll catch their child making a jump shot like Michael Jordan or a goal like Wayne Gretzky. Some want these clips for their family video archive. Others seem to be hoping the clips will be someday used in a sports documentary. But something as simple and joyful as filming your kids' sports games can now be more complex and miserable, thanks to the private investors who are buying up so much of America's economy. Today, we're going to tell you how private investors have entered the world of youth sports and what that actually means for your kids and for your community. And we're going to recount the story of how an investigation at the Lever prompted a national outcry, one that led to a small but mighty victory. That's all coming up on today's episode.
The fact of the matter is, once we sort of stopped really listening to working class voters and poor voters, we ultimately delivered a platform and a message that was not terribly compelling to them.
That's Democratic Senator Chris Murphy on a bonus episode of Lever Time, just a couple weeks after the 2024 presidential election. I'd invited Chris Murphy on the show during the Democrats' haze of defeat and uncertainty. In that episode, we talked about the areas that Democrats have failed in and how to strengthen their agenda. And one of the things that Senator Chris Murphy suggested really stuck with me.
We should talk about private equity and the way that private equity is buying up all of the things that matter to us and robbing us of the rituals that we love and adore. I just learned that parents of my kids' hockey team now are no longer allowed to videotape our kids' games because a private equity company has bought up all the rinks and is selling access to their closed circuit television.
I agreed with the first thing that Chris Murphy said. Challenging private equity companies is an important issue that Democrats should be hammering home. And that term, private equity, that you're hearing more and more about in the news, it's kind of a catch-all. It means a lot of different things to lots of different people. There's no single agreed-upon definition. But when we use that term in this episode, what we're talking about is distant investors who come into communities, buy up local businesses, and try to profit off them. They often end up either breaking up those companies and selling them off for parts, or jacking up prices, providing lackluster service, and exploiting legacy brands for profit. When you're trying to imagine private equity, just put Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street into your mind.
You got 90% of the American public out there with little or no net worth. I create nothing. I own. We make the rules, pal.
So what does that have to do with local youth sports? After talking to Senator Murphy, I just couldn't stop thinking about what he said.
Parents of my kids' hockey team now are no longer allowed to videotape our kids' games because a private equity company has bought up all the rinks.
Okay, look, we've heard corporate horror stories before, but could this one really be true? Or was this just a senator exaggerating to make a point? I mean, could a company really be preventing parents from filming their own kids playing sports? That sounds insane, like something from Mr. Burns in The Simpsons.
Will you at least permit us to live in your socialist paradise?
It turns out that this was not the first time that Senator Chris Murphy had mentioned this recording restriction at his kids' hockey game. And I wasn't the only one at the Lever who'd gotten stuck on this particular piece of information.
I'm Luke Goldstein. I'm a reporter here at the Lever. And I guess for the purposes of the episode, I'm sort of the resident sports reporter now on staff.
Around the same time that I spoke with Senator Chris Murphy, Luke attended an event called Fight Corporate Monopolies in 2024, where Senator Murphy was a speaker. And it was at this event that Murphy said the same thing.
I was just told this last weekend that if I live stream my child's hockey game, my kid's team will be penalized and lose a place in the standings.
Murphy's offhand comment stuck with Luke too.
And it just seemed like, such a shocking incident that I was keen to figure out if this was just a one-off, an isolated event, or if this was actually somewhat more endemic to the new world of youth hockey and youth sports more broadly.
So what do big private investors have to do with local youth sports? That's what Luke started to dig into after he heard Senator Murphy's comment.
There's never been a really convincing deep dive about what does that investment actually mean for changes on the ground to the way that the sport's played and the way players and parents interact with it. So that's what really captured my attention about the story.
Luke went on the hunt for parents, players, and youth sports officials to try to verify this claim that parents were getting banned for recording video of their kids' games.
Seems like a very basic, simple pleasure. And, the fact that that doesn't really exist anymore in the same way, I think is kind of shocking to people.
As a dad, I know this feeling of wanting to capture your kids' big moments. Having extended family that lives far away means that my kids' grandparents miss out on some big milestones. And there's this parental instinct we have to want to preserve memories, to cherish them later on. Luke started finding answers in a place where a lot of Americans go when they have complaints: online chat forums and message boards.
I kind of initially just started listening into what were the kinds of discussions that sports parents were having, or, Facebook groups and Reddit and stuff like that. And, a few things really stuck out to me. For one, parents were already tapped into the giant enterprise that their kids' beloved sports have turned into. And there were a couple, main themes that sort of kept coming up. One was a lack of investment in the actual sports facilities that they felt had been decrepit, despite how wealthy a lot of these companies are that are now buying them up. There was fluctuations in schedules for their kids' teams that hadn't really, existed before, all kinds of weird added fees. And lo and behold, as well, what I came across is that there is this practice now, an official policy, that you can't really record your kids' games anymore.
It turns out that the culprit behind this rule was a company called Black Bear Sports, now the largest owner-operator of hockey rinks in the country. They own 42 rinks across 11 states, mostly in the Northeast, Midwest, and Mid-Atlantic coast. The company was founded by this guy.
I managed my kids' teams, coached when they were really little. I'm not a great hockey player by any stretch.
That's Murray Gunty, Black Bear Sports founder and CEO. He's a self-proclaimed hockey fan who got his start in finance at one of the world's largest private equity firms called Blackstone. Later on, Gunty launched his own private equity firm in 2002 called Blackstreet Capital Management.
What Blackstreet Capital does is they buy up mostly small to medium-sized distressed assets, various companies, try to spruce them up and make them a little bit more profitable.
This is the same kind of model that Blackstreet has implemented through Black Bear Sports Group, which Murray Gunty founded in 2015.
What Black Bear is doing with the rinks is not unlike what's happened with private equity and other large financial firms in a number of other markets, including, healthcare being one of them, where private equity sort of pours in investment to a market that may already have lots of problems that are going on.
In recent decades, ice hockey has taken a hit. Rinks require a lot of money and a lot of maintenance, and huge amounts of energy to reach those freezing temperatures. That's a tough ask, especially as utility bills have shot up over the last decade.
Ice rinks used to be more municipally controlled, or at least received, public funding at the local level. A lot of that was slashed starting roughly in the 90s, and there's just far fewer municipally controlled rinks today.
And when funding is tight and a business is struggling, that's when a private investment firm like Black Bear can be eager to step in. They buy up rinks that are strapped for cash or on the verge of bankruptcy, vowing to make them more profitable. Take this popular indoor rink in southern Michigan called Wings West.
When Wings West announced they would be closing, it had many community members concerned where youth hockey players and figure skaters were going to practice and play.
The previous owner of Wings West closed the rink in September of last year after a reported ice plant failure. Ice sports like hockey and skating had been shifted to another local rink in the area, but that rink was also set to close in the coming years. So in this news clip, you can hear the optimism.
With this new buyer of Wings West, it's given them renewed hope this space will not go to waste.
Black Bear here sounds like the hero, saving a beloved community center after bureaucratic failure. It makes me think of the classic 90s movie, The Mighty Ducks, where Emilio Estevez's character transforms a terrible boys hockey team into all-stars.
Back to basics. Skating. Go, go.
But Black Bear is no Emilio Estevez.
Black Bear Sports Group says their purchase of Wings West ensures hundreds of local athletes and families will still have access to ice.
Private investors' goal is to make anything they touch more lucrative. The problem? Lucrative doesn't always mean better for the rest of us.
When Black Bear comes into town, maybe they make the investments for the teams that they like. But there are all these teams that used to play at rinks that have been cut out and don't get access to those rinks because Black Bear brings in their own leagues, their own teams that they control, or other tournaments that they're directing through a facility, even if they've, spruced it up and made it nicer.
Which brings us back to the recording ban at Black Bear-owned ice rinks. A rule book for the 2025-2026 season for the Atlantic Hockey Federation, one of Black Bear's youth hockey leagues. It states, quote, "It is illegal to video any games in the AHF. If a player, parent, family member, or friend produce a video or live stream or any other broadcast production of an AHF event or game, the player can be immediately suspended or dismissed from the team, league, or tournament for the remainder of the season with no refunds provided." So what's Black Bear's justification for this? Luke got in touch with a Black Bear spokesperson who told him that the policy exists to reduce, quote, significant safety risks to players. In other words, they claim that the rule was protecting youth players from being recorded without their consent. Luke didn't accept that explanation at face value. He started asking more questions.
If there's someone showing up to a practice or a game who's not a parent, not affiliated, and is being kind of weird, they're usually kicked out of the facility. It seems kind of weird to police against, a few people who may record games, to ban it across the board for anyone to enjoy.
So Luke kept searching. And as he spoke with parents and coaches and combed through documents, Luke found another reason why recording is being banned. Black Bear has its own subscription streaming service. It's called Black Bear TV. In September 2024, the company put out a public notice which stated that, quote, all games played inside the Black Bear venues and certain partner venues will be streamed exclusively on Black Bear TV.
What started as a legal liability concern has now become a pretty significant enterprise for Black Bear that they've managed to monetize, because it's not just that they say no one can record, it's that you can't record because you have to use our streaming service, which, by the way, costs about $25 to $35 a month if you're just getting the full package service. It's $14.99 per game. It's more than paying for ESPN.
Through his reporting, Luke got his hands on an exclusive contract that went into more details about this rule between Black Bear TV and one of the company's affiliated ice rinks.
You, the ice rink, are actually obligated to make sure that no recording equipment gets into the arena so that it may be used to record a game. It spells it out. It's iPhones, it's, all kinds of regular handheld equipment. So that's really...
It's like turn in your iPhone if you want to come and watch practice or watch a game.
Right.
So what could happen if a parent defied the rules and recorded a game anyway? Luke said that there was a risk their kid could end up on a blacklist.
If you violate this policy, the player will be kicked out of the league for theoretically their parents, friends, or anyone else's violating these rules. And, the way it's written is more or less a one strike and you're out policy that may not be actually how it's enforced, but as it's written down in the rule book, that is an option.
So remember what Senator Chris Murphy had said?
Parents of my kid's hockey team now are no longer allowed to videotape our kids' games.
It appears that the gist of what Senator Murphy was describing was true. To be clear, Murphy has never publicly acknowledged that his son played in a Black Bear-owned rink. The Lever has reported on many ways that private equity is degrading industries from dentistry to bowling to in-home care for seniors. And we've reported on how that has broken down the quality of service while milking returns for investors. This ice rink situation seemed to be yet another example of the private equity playbook being applied, this time in local youth sports. Now, for their part, Black Bear has been insisting that it is, quote, not owned by a private equity firm and has nothing to do with Wall Street. On its website, the company says that, quote, Blackstreet Capital, a minority owner of Black Bear, is a private corporation primarily owned by Murray Gunty. However, Blackstreet referred to itself as a private equity firm on its own website up until 2020 without any clear financial restructuring. Court records in an ongoing lawsuit against Black Bear Sports describe it as a, quote, wholly owned subsidiary of Blackstreet Capital Holdings, LLC, which, quote, serves as Mr. Gunty's private equity fund. This back and forth over the term private equity is a reminder that that term is kind of vague. But regardless of what you want to call it, the facts are what matter here. This appeared to be a classic example of the private investment industry stomping into local communities and doing things that those communities don't really like. It was a pretty damning story, one of many in our series of reports on the tycoons buying up America's economy. But once Luke's story published, the public's reaction went far beyond anything Luke or I could have ever predicted.
Black Bear was not particularly happy with, I think, how they were portrayed.
More on that after the break. Welcome back to Lever Time.
Parents of young athletes are expressing concern that youth sports could soon become even more expensive.
The rapid commercialization of youth sports has become big business. One recent estimate put the total valuation of the youth sports market at $40 billion. Households now spend an average of $1,000 a year on their child's primary sport. That's almost a 50% increase from 2019.
Mommy's gonna like this at all.
The professionalization of the youth sports industry has further driven up costs. Some parents these days are even paying for personal trainers and sports psychologists to give their kids a leg up in the hopes of them reaching the collegiate or professional level. With parents dumping more and more money into their kids' sports, the private investment industry is taking notice. Here's the Levers reporter Luke Goldstein again, who's been reporting on private investors' entrance into youth sports, specifically hockey.
The way that they look at it is we have this market that's already become more of a luxury good. It's a customer base that's willing to pay top dollar. So it's easier to kind of, squeeze a little bits of profit here and there.
And the youth hockey industry on its own has skyrocketed.
Youth hockey is the most expensive sport for parents, costing on average $2,600 per kid per year, according to the Aspen Institute, and that was in 2019.
Luke's reporting on Black Bear Sports Group revealed the company's harsh filming tactics. But his investigation also tugged on the thread of a deeper takeover in youth hockey as a whole. In 2024, Murray Gunty, the private equity tycoon who is the CEO of Black Bear Sports, he was named commissioner of the United States Premier Hockey League. That's one of the largest top-level hockey junior leagues. The U.S. Premier Hockey League hosts more than 75 teams across North America and offers a direct path for young athletes to play at the college level. Shortly after Gunty was named commissioner, the league agreed to make Black Bear TV the exclusive provider for all of its games. It doesn't stop there. Black Bear's vice president is the league commissioner for two other top-level junior hockey leagues. Those organizations collect dues, set rules, dictate playing schedules, and pick where tournaments will be held, like Black Bear's very own ice rinks. Black Bear even launched its own online hockey rating system, which determines team rankings and player statuses. In other words, Black Bear is overseeing everything and raking in cash every step of the way. So this acquisition of power isn't just upsetting parents and coaches, it's potentially stifling competition from other companies that have historically worked within youth sports. Before launching its own streaming service, Black Bear contracted with another broadcasting company called Live Barn. In that previous agreement, Black Bear and Live Barn split the revenue from the streaming services. So when Black Bear decided to launch Black Bear TV and take full control over streaming services, Live Barn was pissed. Live Barn filed a lawsuit last year, claiming that Black Bear stole their business and used insider information about its pricing and terms to convince other ice rinks to sign deals with Black Bear. Once Luke's story on Black Bear's ice rinks recording restrictions was published, he started hearing from dozens of people, coaches, parents, players, even a local mayor. Most of these people wanted to remain anonymous because they were afraid of retaliation, but it was undeniable. The story had exploded.
A new report from The Lever examines how restrictive streaming practices have become widespread in youth hockey and increasingly in many youth sports held at corporate-owned facilities.
Black Bear even bans parents from live streaming their kids' games.
Confiscating phones, banning parents from filming their kids playing sports. Like, what are we doing here, America?
If I don't make my kids' games, what makes this asshole think I want to watch it later via streaming?
As Luke's story made the rounds, one thing became pretty clear.
Black Bear was not particularly happy with, I think, how they were portrayed.
Black Bear issued a public statement disputing Luke's reporting and claiming that their recording policy only applied to live streaming games. Black Bear said that while they don't allow live streaming games online, quote, parents are always welcome to record videos and take photos of their own child during games and practices.
I'd been in touch with a spokesperson for Black Bear before the story came out. I was very clear about this specific policy, and they sort of had explained to me the reason for the policy, but they did not really challenge what I had brought to them. After the story ran, they started putting out a number of statements that sort of claimed that there had been some misinformation online. It wasn't even necessarily directly about my article, I guess, but that was, I think, clearly what they were talking about. And their pushback had been that we only ban parents from live streaming games at our rinks.
But this wasn't in line with what The Lever uncovered in Black Bear's rule books and contracts, or what parents and coaches were telling us. So Luke confronted Black Bear.
I did challenge Black Bear on this, and I was in touch once again with one of their spokespeople to say, you know, this is what's written in your contracts, this is what you're saying in public. Are you changing your policy, or what's the discrepancy? You know, at that point, it seems that either they've maybe written so many contracts and weren't necessarily sure exactly what was in there, or they were trying to just cover their bases, but they have actually now committed that they are going to rewrite their contracts moving forward so that parents can videotape games as long as they do not live stream the events online. That seems to be their hard line that they're drawing.
In a statement to The Lever, the Black Bear spokesperson wrote, quote, "We apologize for the confusion this has caused and will be amending our contracts and rulebooks to allow for full game and practice recording." We're going to take one more quick break, but before we continue, I want to remind you that the reporting we do here at The Lever, like Luke's Black Bear investigation, it's reader-supported and reader-funded. If you'd like to help us keep doing this kind of work, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. You'll get ad-free episodes in the process. When we come back, the Black Bear saga continues. What happens when Luke's investigation goes to Washington? We'll be right back. Welcome back to Lever Time. Hockey isn't the only youth sport being infiltrated by the private investment industry. A company called Unrivaled Sports, which is run by two former Blackstone employees, it's been buying baseball camps, flag football, and other sports, according to reporting from the New York Times. Varsity Brands, the competitive cheerleading company, it's another one. And in a lot of ways, Varsity wrote the playbook for Black Bear. In 2018, Varsity was bought by the private equity firm Bain Capital, a bigger and more well-known firm than Black Bear's Blackstreet Capital. Bain might sound familiar because it was actually co-founded by former Massachusetts governor and presidential candidate Mitt Romney. Here's Romney talking about his business philosophy on the debate stage in 2012.
Throughout my career, I have worked to try and build enterprises, hopefully to return money to investors. There's nothing wrong with profit, by the way.
Varsity Brands faced a class action antitrust lawsuit back in 2020 for alleged anti-competitive practices. The lawsuit alleged that Varsity pushed out cheerleading rivals by forcing teams to purchase Varsity's own apparel and equipment. The company settled that class action suit for $82 million. Here's Matt Stoller of the American Economic Liberties Project, who reported on Varsity's cheerleading monopoly back in 2021.
They tell you through the USASF what the rules are. They can sort of influence who wins. And so what they end up doing is they say, well, you have to buy our apparel, you have to buy our equipment, you have to pay our fees. And so it's really expensive.
Varsity also expanded into entertainment streaming services with their own Varsity TV. Like Black Bear TV, Varsity reserved the right to live stream the company's competitions. A popular 2020 Netflix documentary called Cheer actually showcased this. The filmmakers followed a cheerleading team across the country, but Varsity didn't allow the crew to film inside the venue they owned in Daytona, Florida. It created a lot of confusion and intrigue about what kind of operation Varsity was running.
There was like a 3-minute segment on Cheer where they talked about how Varsity controls everything. And my colleague, Sarah Miller, was like, that looks like a monopoly. So I looked into it. Sure enough, it's like John D. Rockefeller, but glittery.
Not too long after Luke's reporting was published, there was a congressional hearing by the House Education and Workforce Committee. Here's Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley.
Sports have served an important role in building the character of America's youth, keeping kids active and teaching important lessons in perseverance, discipline, and teamwork.
The hearing focused on the rising cost of youth sports, and lawmakers honed in on the role that private equity and Wall Street firms are playing in all of this.
Private equity firms are now pouring billions into youth sports facilities, tournaments, and leagues, further fueling exorbitant spending. As programs get more expensive, fewer kids have access to affordable opportunities in their own communities to learn important life skills and to try new things.
Luke's reporting was cited in the hearing by Katie Van Dyke, a senior legal fellow at the American Economic Liberties Project.
A recent report by The Lever revealed that Black Bear is often the only game in town for hockey leagues and tournaments and forces parents into its streaming service to record games.
Black Bear's model, as Katie later explained in the hearing, is an example of vertical integration. That's when a company takes control over all of these pieces of a whole business. In Black Bear's case, they have all these separate businesses, teams, rinks, tournaments, all rolled up into one franchise. A Black Bear team will play at a Black Bear-owned rink, which brings in money that all ultimately trickles back to the same management. Katie Van Dyke spoke at length about what can be done about this kind of business strategy. Her suggestion to lawmakers? An outright ban on vertical integration in youth sports.
There is absolutely no reason that the CEO of Black Bear Sports should also own the ranking system for those teams and players, and should also serve as a commissioner on a junior hockey league.
Throughout this story, I kept thinking about the best parts of being a kid. For me, it was recess, playing basketball after school, getting to hang out with my friends outside. I think we all agree that any kid who wants to play sports should be able to do so, and parents should be able to watch and film and cheer on their kids from the bleachers without having to worry about how much it's going to cost them. Profiting off making youth sports more inaccessible for families feels kind of like exploiting the love and joy we have for our own kids. It feels like a business strategy, preying on our desire for kids to have a good time on the basketball court, or the cheerleading squad, or on the ice rink. At least for now, thanks to Luke, parents at Black Bear ice rinks can capture the moments that they want to relive again and again. Even though private investors are following the money, we're right there, holding them accountable. Thanks for listening to another episode of Lever Time. Lever Time is a production of The Lever. This episode was produced by Natalie Bettendorf and Ariella Markowitz. Our theme music is by Nick Campbell. You can subscribe to Lever Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. For ad-free episodes, exclusive bonus content, and access to The Lever's entire archive of investigative journalism, please consider becoming a premium subscriber. Head over to levernews.com to learn more about becoming a paid subscriber or click the link in the episode's show notes. I'm David Sirota. We'll be back next week with another episode of Lever Time.